All right, well, welcome everyone. Today we have the third office hours for the Grants to Improve the Criminal Justice Response Program. My name is Jason Patry. I'm a grants management specialist on the ICJR unit, and we'll be hosting this office hours today. Our unit. So we have our Associate Director, Aisha Battle, on the call, our team lead, Latanya Edie, and then other program managers, Lashandi Beasley and Ali Jerome. And we also have Amber Hilton on the line. So the way this is structured, this is a question and answer session. We are going to quickly go through the Grants to Improve the Criminal Justice Response Notice of Funding Opportunity. And as we do that, we're going to address some questions that we received via email. So we'll answer those questions as we go through the NOFO. And then we're going to open it up to questions for you all. And you can submit your questions in really one of two ways. So you have the ability to unmute yourself. So you can come online and ask your questions verbally. Or if you would use the Q&A function, not the chat, but the Q&A function, you can type your question into the Q&A. We will answer those in the Q&A, but we will also read them out loud and answer them verbally. This session is being recorded to be posted on the OVW website, so be cognizant of that. And if you don't mind, if you do come on, unmute yourself and come on, please remember to unmute yourself again once you're done asking your question. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and go through some items and some of the questions we received online. As we're going through this, feel free to start putting questions into the Q&A. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is I want to draw your attention to the OVW website. Many of you may be pulling the NOFO open directly from a link to the NOFO, and there's some important information on the website that I want to make sure you are aware of. So if you go to OVW's website, and that is justice.gov/OVW, and come here to the grants drop-down menu and click on funding opportunities, you will be taken to OVW's funding opportunity page. This is important for a number of reasons. First of all, there is a notice regarding out-of-scope activities on this page that is important for you to read. So please be cognizant of that information. And then if you scroll down, you're going to find the fiscal year 2026 discretionary grant program information. This is where you're going to find information specific to the ICJR program, and of course, every OVW program that we have. You will notice that if a program is accepting applications, it will say so here in these drop-down menus. So we'll go down to the Grants to Improve the Criminal Justice Response Program. Within this drop-down menu, there's important information as well. So please read this. It also provides access to a lot of the documents that are linked in the Notice of Funding Opportunity, which we will go through today, but this is where they are housed. So you can also access them directly through the website. One thing I want to point out is this information about out-of-scope activities is not found in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. It is only found here. So with respect to out-of-scope activities, you will access the fiscal year 2025 NOFO for a list of those out-of-scope activities. They are not in the fiscal year 2026 NOFO. And I want to highlight that real quick because we received a question around out-of-scope activities. And so I want to draw your attention to those. And let me get to them here. I'm currently in the fiscal year 25 notice of funding opportunity. There we go. So out of scope activities starting on page 17, we received a question as to whether or not grant funds can be used to provide services to minors. And that question has several answers. First of all, the award funds for ICJR can only be used to provide services to adolescents and adults. And that is, an adolescent is somebody who is age 11 or older. ICJR cannot be used to provide services to victims under the age of 11. Now, there's a couple caveats to that. First of all, if this person is a victim of sexual assault that started prior to the age of 11 and continued past the age of 11, then ICJR funds can be used to provide services to that individual. Secondly, if that person who is under the age of 11 is being provided services ancillary to the victim who is an adult or adolescent, that is allowable under the ICJR program. And let me provide an example of that. So a common example is a minor child being provided services when their parent or guardian is the victim of a domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. So the guardian or parent is the victim, and the child is receiving services ancillary to that. That is also allowable under the ICJR program. But that information is here, in fiscal year 2025 NOFO. So again, follow that link from the OVW website to get to those out-of-scope activities. Okay, so let's move over to the fiscal year 2026 NOFO, which is where we're going to spend the rest of our time and specifically answering some questions we received online. But just really quickly, some important information that you're going to see in this NOFO. First of all, applications, there's a two-part application process. The first step is to submit the application in grants.gov. That is submitting the SF424. The deadline for that is August 18th at 11:59 p.m. The second part is to submit the full application in Just Grants. The deadline for submitting the application in Just Grants is August 20th at 4:59 p.m. Eastern Time. So please note the time difference between those two deadlines. Once you submit an application in grants.gov, you will be invited to apply in the Just Grants system. It does take some time to get yourself set up in grants.gov if you are not already, as well as to get yourself set up in Just Grants if you're not already set up. So please plan ahead for those processes and allow time between your application submissions. I do not recommend you planning to submit on the days of those deadlines, August 18th and August 20th. In grants.gov, you'll be looking for the ICJR grants.gov opportunity number highlighted here on the screen. Once you search that, and you can also search by name, but once you search that opportunity number, you're going to find that there are two categories to apply to. And these are represented by competition ID numbers. The ICJR program is Category 1. Category 2 is an invitation-only opportunity, and so you will not be applying to Category 2. Please make sure you're applying to Category 1. And the competition ID number for Category 1 is here on this page. Likewise, for Category 1, there's the information on this page is separated by category, so please pay attention to the information related to Category 1. For example, anticipated award amounts range from $500,000 to $1,500,000. These are 36-month project periods. Okay. So one of the questions we received relates to eligibility. So I'm going to point out the eligibility section here. The information in the NOFO provides eligibility section here on page 4. And that is broken out by government entity and nonprofit entities. Definitions of each of these items are found in the footnotes below. And I specifically want to point out, we get a lot of questions about this. The definition of victim service provider is number 8 here. That definition is split between page 4 and page 5. So the definition continues in the footnotes on page 5. So that's the definition of victim service provider. So the question we received related to eligibility is that we are a law enforcement agency. Are we eligible to apply as the lead advocate or applicant, excuse me? The answer is no, but let me explain that. So for government entities, eligible applicants are a state government, an Indian tribal government, a unit of local government, which may be a municipality, it could be a county, a borough, a parish, or a state or local court. So a police department is a department within a government. It is actually the government that would need to apply. So the applicant would be the state, tribal government, unit of local government. So for example, a city police department, they would apply through the city. The city is the applicant. There's some considerations to be made, and we'll talk about that in the MOU section when you fill out the MOU. But remember, law enforcement agencies, prosecutors' offices, you need to apply through your government. Okay. Next, I want to point out we received questions from faith-based organizations and other nonprofit organizations on whether or not they were eligible to apply as a nonprofit organization. And sorry, I'm scrolling. Let me scroll back up to the nonprofit section. So here we see the information about nonprofits and faith-based organizations. A nonprofit organization must be a 501c3 to apply. They also must be either a coalition or a victim service provider. A coalition and a victim service provider must be a 501c3 nonprofit in order to apply. So both have to be true. Domestic violence coalitions are a set group of organizations within each state that are defined by the Department of Health and Human Services. Sexual assault coalitions are also a set number or a set list of organizations defined by the CDC. So make sure you're on that list if you're applying as a coalition. But a victim service provider can be any victim service provider as long as it meets the definition we talked about in item 8 here in the footnotes. Again, coalitions and victim service providers must be 501c3 nonprofits. Okay, we also received questions about the certifications of eligibility, so I want to highlight that next. Certifications of eligibility are found on page 5, and the certifications you complete are based on your application type. And so you will see that tribes, states, and local governments, there's a list here of 3 certifications: the certification of eligibility, the prosecution certification, and the minor certification. Those are all required for those applications. The same list is required for coalitions and victim service providers. Courts, so state or local courts, only have 1 certification. The NOFO links to those sample certification documents here. So open up those links that pertain to your application type. And I'm going to go ahead and do that now because we have a question about signatories. So the sample certification document provides instructions on how to complete the certifications. And you will see I opened the certification for state, tribal governments, and unit of local government. So state, tribal governments, and unit of local governments must submit the certification of eligibility, the prosecution certification, and the minor certification. You're able to certify in one of two ways, that you are either currently in compliance or that you will come into compliance. And you will see that there are separate certifications for those two ways to certify. Now, the question we have is around the signatory requirements. All certifications need to be signed by the chief executive officer of the government agency. And so the chief executive officer refers to the highest official of that state, tribe, or unit of local government. So for example, for a state, that is the governor. For a unit of local government, that could be the mayor or city administrator. For a municipality, or it could be for a county, that might be the chair of the county commissioners. And depending on how your county is structured, I know in some states that is a county judge, not a criminal judge, but a county judge is the definition or title of that chief executive officer. That is the person that needs to sign these certifications. For those of you who are victim service providers, this is still true. Victim service providers must have their government partner sign the certifications of eligibility, the prosecution certification and the minor certification. Okay, so back to the NOFO. We have questions about required partnerships. So every organization has a required partner. For coalitions and victim service providers, the partner is a government entity, and that's what is listed here in the NOFO. But let me qualify that. If you actually read the statute, there's a more strict definition of government here, and to point that out, I'm actually going to come back up to eligibility. So for a victim service provider, the required partner must be a state, an Indian tribal government, or a unit of local government. Same way a police department cannot be the lead applicant. The police department can't be your required partner. It has to be the state, unit of local government, or tribal government. Courts cannot be the required partner for a victim service provider or coalition. For government entities who are applying, so states, units of local government, tribal governments, and courts, the required partner is a victim service provider. It can also be a coalition. It doesn't say that here, but it does in the statute. So it can be a victim service provider or a coalition that is the required partner. Your required partner needs to be documented in your memorandum of understanding. They are signatory on that memorandum of understanding. We're going to talk more about the memorandum of understanding in a little bit. Okay, the next question we've had is related to the purposes of the ICJR program. For those of you who have applied in previous years, we used to call them purpose areas. ICJR has 26 purpose areas or purposes. They are listed here in the NOFO. And the question we received is, can a victim service provider apply to any of the purposes of the ICJR program? And the answer is yes. So those of you who are familiar with ICJR and have applied in the past, you know that previously victim service providers were limited to the purposes they could apply to. That is no longer the case. Victim service providers may apply to any of the 26 ICJR purposes. So we have several questions related to what we see on the screen now. This is the Policing and Prosecution Initiative and information related to the sexual assault set aside. There are two opportunities for applicants to apply for funds in addition to the population-based funding cap, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The first one here is the Policing and Prosecution Initiative. Applicants who provide funds to a law enforcement agency or a prosecutor's office for policing or prosecution activities may apply for up to $300,000 in funds beyond the population-based funding cap. The question we have related to this is that if we apply for policing and prosecution funds to fund a prosecutor, but the $300,000 is not sufficient to fund the prosecutor and their fringe benefits, can we also use ICJR funding for that? The answer is yes. So all ICJR allowable activities are also allowable on the policing and prosecution or with the Policing and Prosecution Initiative funding. So you can use ICJR funds to supplement the activities that you're wanting to fund with policing and prosecution money. That may not be true, vice versa. Policing and Prosecution Fund is limited and is a smaller scope than the ICJR funding. Okay, with respect to sexual assault, applicants who are proposing that at least 45% of their budget are allocated for activities that meaningfully address sexual assault may apply for up to $200,000 in additional funding. And so the question here is, can we apply for both policing and prosecution and sexual assault funds? The answer is yes. So if your application is such that you are meeting the requirements for both the Policing and Prosecution Initiative and the sexual assault set aside, you are able to apply for the additional $300,000 for policing and prosecution, as well as the additional $200,000 for sexual assault. But remember, with sexual assault, 45% of your activities must meaningfully address sexual assault. So what this means is that if you are addressing both policing and prosecution and sexual assault, you may apply for up to an additional $500,000 above the population-based funding cap. Okay. And again, we're going to talk about the population-based funding cap in just a moment when we get to that part of the NOFO. I do want to highlight here that this list on section 4 is the full list of required items for your application in Just Grants. It is not simply the items that are marked required in red. It potentially is all of these items. The rest of the items are applicable based on your application type and your activities, which is why they're not marked in red. So please locate the information related to these in the NOFO. Oftentimes it's via links. So you're going to find that this NOFO is rather short, but it has lots of links. Please open up all those links and be familiar with the information that is provided to you. So for example, I'll use the prosecution certification as an example. We've already talked about this. Courts are not required to submit the prosecution certification, but governments are, and nonprofits, so victim service providers and coalitions, are required to submit the prosecution certification. So please make sure it is included. Another example would be the delivery of legal assistance certification. You only submit this if you are providing legal assistance as part of your grant-funded project. So if you are, that is a required document. If you are not, then it's not required. Okay, I'm just going to keep scrolling down. The information related to the proposal narrative is found here. And okay, so budget. This is where you find the population-based funding caps that we mentioned previously. And so it is by population. This is the ICJR funding. So the population of the jurisdiction that your project will serve will dictate how much money you're eligible for ICJR funding. And so, for example, if your population is under 400,000 people for the jurisdiction that you're serving, you are eligible to apply for $500,000. Remember, the policing and prosecution funding and the sexual assault funding is in addition to that. So if your population is 300,000 people, you're eligible to apply for 500,000 in ICGR. If you address both policing and prosecution and sexual assault, you're eligible for an additional 500,000, so potentially $1 million. The other thing I want to point out here in the budget, we get a lot of questions about how to structure the budget, and especially this year with the policing and prosecution and sexual assault funding. There's a link here to a sample budget narrative that makes it very easy for you to separate out your ICGR funding or proposal from your policing and prosecution proposal from your sexual assault proposal. I highly encourage you to review that sample budget narrative. It is not required to use the sample budget, but it is there as a tool for you. We get a lot of questions about the set aside for training and technical assistance. For those of you who have applied in the past, this has been a much higher number. It is $5,000 for the entire project period. So you must budget $5,000 for OVW sponsored training and technical assistance for the 36-month project period. If you want to, you can budget more than that if you feel it is necessary, but the minimum is $5,000. Okay, so the MOU we mentioned previously relating to the required partner and the eligible applicant type. There's very little information in the NOFO about the MOU. It is all provided on OVW's website, so please use the link to go there. With respect to the required partner, so the applicant must have the required partner. So, for example, a city government is required to partner with a victim service provider or a coalition. The MOU is where you document that partnership. So when you go to the website, it'll ask you a series of questions that you include in the MOU to provide that documentation. And then the required partner, as well as the lead applicant, must sign the MOU. The signatory is the authorized representative of each organization that signs on to the MOU. The MOU must at least have the lead applicant and the required partner. You can also, for those of you who are government organizations, like a law enforcement agency or a prosecutor's office within a government, the law enforcement agency or prosecutor's office is going to lead the project. Again, they can't be the lead applicant. It has to be the government. But if they're going to lead the project, it would be important to have their information in the MOU as well. So again, that information is on the website as well as a sample MOU. One of the questions we have is the MOU limited to 5 pages? Can we exceed 5 pages on the MOU? The answer is no, technically. When you go to the website, you will find that the length of the MOU is limited to 5 pages double-spaced or 2.5 pages single-spaced. That does not include the signature pages, but you need to be responsive to the requirements of the MOU within that 5-page for double-spaced or 2.5 page for single-spaced documents. The signature page can be in addition to that, and so attach both the actual body of the MOU as well as all the signatures. We'll kind of move past this, but there's additional application components. Again, these are items that are on that list in section 4 that I showed you. There's more information related to these here. All these links take you to the applicable section within the MOU to talk about, for example, the HIV certification or the delivery of legal assistance certification. We get a lot of questions about the summary data sheet. Is this something that's filled out in Just Grants? And the answer is no. It is an attachment. So if you go to this, click on the summary data sheet, it will take you to this document. Fill out this document, and it must be attached in Just Grants with your application. And when you're in Just Grants, you'll see where to attach that. But it is an attachment. Beyond the SF424, the only item that you are filling out, there's 3 things that you actually fill out online. That is the SF424 in grants.gov, and within Just Grants, it's your applicant information, so the information about your organization, and the pre-award risk assessment is an online form. Everything else is attached. Okay, so I think we're getting to the end of this, and we're going to open it up to Q&A. Let me just make sure. Yep. So hopefully I got to all the questions that we submitted online. If I didn't get to yours, again, feel free to put it into the Q&A or speak out loud. And so we're going to open up now to the actual Q&A portion. So again, if you'd like to unmute yourself, please raise your hand and we'll call on you. Otherwise, we're going to start going through the questions that were answered in the Q&A. Let me stop sharing my screen. Right, so I'm just going to start from the oldest here. So our proposal includes sexual assault forensic and nurse examiner resources and a principal attorney. Our county has, okay, population. Based on this, we believe we qualify for $1,500,000. So the population of the county is 890,000. You feel you qualify for $1 million in ICJR money, 300,000 for policing and prosecution, and 200,000 for sexual assault. That appears to be correct. And the reason I would say this is correct is that your jurisdiction population is 890,000. That qualifies you for $1 million in ICJR funds. You have the prosecutor performing prosecution functions. That would mean you're eligible for $300,000 in policing and prosecution. You have the sexual assault nurse examiner. That would be the only caveat, is as long as your sexual assault activities or your project meaningfully addresses sexual assault through, not saying this well, 45% of your budget, then you would be eligible for the additional $300,000 in sexual assault funds, which you're correct, brings you to 1.5 million. Okay, so next question. Our victim service provider is hoping to move into a larger facility to better handle the increased work related to domestic violence and sexual assault. Can grant funds used to help cover the increased rent for the new facility? Yes, rent is an allowable cost. Rent generally for either project partners or for the lead applicant needs to be prorated based on the project's share of that rent. So that can be done in a number of different ways, but it needs to be prorated. And so it is unlikely that ICJR funds can be used to cover all of the rent. It should be prorated. So the next question, for purpose area 20, okay. Oh, to provide human immunodeficiency virus testing programs, counseling and prophylaxis for victims of sexual assault. And that is the purpose area language for those of you who aren't familiar with it. If the victim tests positive for HIV and does not have insurance or other forms of assistance to pay for medical treatment, can grant funds be used to pay for medicine and treatment for the victim? Um, Let me help you with that, ICJR folks.
Could you reread the oh, here I found it. I'm reading it, Jason.
We're going to answer that in just a moment. Uh, I'm going to move on. We can circle
Oh,
back to that. Oh, you got it? Okay.
yes, yes, it can be used to pay for that. If it's like, and I would assume, sorry, that this would be part of like a sexual assault kit or exam to David. Our
Um,
funds can be used for that. I
okay.
will say you did touch on a purpose area that is very rarely applied to. So thank you for your interest in it.
Absolutely. So, David, if you have more, if you need to qualify that answer, feel free to hop on and we can discuss it. Um, you can also put additional information in the Q&A, or I do believe you submitted this question via email, so we can also discuss this online. Next question. We are preparing a grant proposal working with two victim service providers. They're both 501c3s. Who would receive fund? Oh, both would receive funding in our proposal. Do we need MOUs for both? One for each? That's two questions. For both, one MOU for each, or one with the three of us? Or can we have an MOU from the main victim service provider and a letter of support from the other? Okay, so I'm I'm assuming oh yeah, you're from the Macomb County, Michigan Prosecutor's Office. So you're a unit of local government. The victim service provider is the required partner. So you have to partner with at least one victim service provider. If you are partnered with two victim service providers, you can submit one MOU with both victim service providers included on the MOU. Do not submit more than one MOU. And I would include both. I think what would make it required for you to include both is if you are serving multiple jurisdictions and one victim service provider serves one jurisdiction and another victim service provider serves another jurisdiction. For example, maybe you have a victim service provider that serves the city and a victim service provider that operates within the county, and your jurisdiction is both encompasses both the city and the county, then you likely need to partner with both victim service providers. And again, you can do that through a single MOU.
Jason, can I make one more note?
Sure.
I just wanted to note, I we know that this year that the MOU is not scored, but it does say in the NOFO that it is our evidencing of partnerships, and so it will be used to scored against what you're proposing to do. And so if you're proposing to work with entities, um, it would seem relevant for you to include them in your MOU. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you. Next question. Are there any grant funding restrictions to provide services to juvenile witnesses to sexual assault and or domestic violence? Can funds be used to provide services to juvenile victims of sexual assault or domestic violence? And can funds be used to prosecute juveniles committing sexual assault? And I think we largely answered this, David, but let us know if we don't. I think the one piece we maybe did not address is witnesses to sexual assault. Um, and so again, the age restriction there is age 11 and over. ICJR funds can be used to provide services to victims age 11 and over. Um, those, but ancillary to services provided to a minor, ancillary to those services for an adult victim or an adolescent victim can also be provided. So let us know if that doesn't answer your question. I think it answers all three of those. We don't have the Q&A publicly available for the other office hours, which is a question. But if you do have additional questions, feel free to send them to the ICJR unit. And we'll post the email in the chat, but it is ICJR at usdoj.gov. If you have any questions that you don't want to ask here or that come to you later, feel free to email us and we'll answer those. Um, but this recording will be made publicly available, so you'll be able to view this recording after. It'll probably be several days, but you'll be able to get access it on the ICJR page. Okay, next question. My organization is a licensed DV and sexual assault program, and we're looking to write for the additional $300,000 in funding to support a prosecutor position for prosecuting domestic and dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. Would this prosecutor be able to prosecute cases of child sex abuse involving sexual abuse of individuals under 18? It can prosecute, again, I think we answered this, but it can prosecute cases involving individuals age 11 and older. So minors, yes, between the ages of 11 and 18. Again, the caveat to that is if the sexual assault began prior to the age of 11, but continued past the age of 11, then yes, you can also provide or prosecute cases for those. Okay, next question. I noticed human trafficking is now included in this NOFO and was not included in the 2021 NOFO. I just wanted to confirm that victims who experienced human trafficking is now allowable along with DVSA and domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. If so, then the NOFO states that we could possibly receive priority review if we assist victims who have experienced human trafficking. Okay, so I can address both of those. Yes, human trafficking is allowable to the extent that it addresses domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. And let me provide an example of how this works. So if there is human trafficking, and through the course of that human trafficking, a victim experiences sexual assault, then you can address the human trafficking. Oftentimes, human trafficking includes labor trafficking. Labor trafficking is not allowable under the ICJR program. So you could not provide services to a victim of labor trafficking. You have to tie it to domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. Let me look at the NOFO. There is the priority related to human trafficking. Let me pull that up. And we can look at it. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again. We're going to look at the fiscal year 26 NOFO. So you're asking about the agency funding priority number 1 for combating human trafficking. Sorry, let me move the Q&A. I lost the second part of that question, David, but
I apologize. Can I step in because this came up at the previous office hours, and I actually in the our attorney advisors actually responded that if labor trafficking is at the intersection of domestic violence and sexual assault, they can do it.
Perfect. Okay. But yes, David, so if you are addressing human trafficking through the context of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking, then you're eligible to apply to agency priority number 1. And for those of you, that's page 10 of the NOFO. Okay, so next question. If the chief executive officer does not sign, okay. However, the county board of commissioners passes a resolution to bind the county to the certification, can the board representative along with the resolution with veto proof board vote serve as a signatory. And David, I believe this is with respect to the certifications of eligibility, the certification of eligibility, the prosecution certification, and the minor certification. I do not believe so. It has to be signed by the chief executive officer of the county. Next question. How many people can take the OVW training? Should it be $5,000 per person? No, so this funding is set aside for OVW sponsored training and technical assistance. Historically, it would be used for something like a grantee orientation. It doesn't have to be per person. So you're not budgeting $5,000 per person, although the funds could be used to support multiple people to attend OVW sponsored training. But it is $5,000 for the 36-month project period. Next question. For the required MOU, aside from the partnership with the primary victim service provider partner, do all organizations listed under subawards and procurement contracts also need to be included in the MOU? I believe you're probably from a government organization. So again, the required partner for a government is a coalition or a victim service provider. For those of you who are coalitions or victim service provider applicants, your required partner is a government. So state government, unit of local government, Indian tribal government. Your required partner must sign the MOU and be documented in the MOU. You can include other organizations, but if you look at the website, it's only requiring the signature of the required partner. Now, the MOU provides information related to your relationship with those partners, the responsibility of those partners, and so this is a document that outlines for you and for your partners those responsibilities under the award. So it is an important document. Leave it at that. The MOU page limit is shorter than in previous years. Yes, absolutely it is. We have multiple partners, which makes it challenging to get all information into the 5 pages. Do you have any guidance? No, we do acknowledge that the page limit is shorter. 5 pages double spaced or 2.5 pages single spaced. It is short. I don't have any guidance for you other than to make sure you fall within that page limit. Oh, I lost my place here. Okay, so regarding the additional funding of up to $300,000 to support dedicated law enforcement officer and prosecutor positions, can these funds be used solely for overtime costs with a dedicated law enforcement agency? Yes. Overtime costs are an allowable cost, and they would fall within the policing and prosecution as long as those overtime costs, I mean, they would be. I don't imagine a scenario where they're not are being provided for law enforcement activities. Okay, next question. We have an existing sexual assault response team. We want to expand forensic examinations to include domestic violence forensic examinations. Would this fall under the ICJR priorities? It falls within the ICJR purposes. And so, yes, a domestic violence forensic exam is an allowable cost. You can use ICJR funding for that. Domestic violence forensic exam would not fall within the sexual assault initiative. So it doesn't account for the possibility of getting the additional $200,000 for sexual assault services, even if that's being funded by us or led by a sexual assault response team. But they are allowable costs. Okay, so Rebecca, I think you have a partial question in here. Feel free to qualify. It says you have additional questions on purpose areas. Let us know what those are, and we're happy to answer. Let's see. So next question, can additional information like charts, background data, and letters of support be attached as miscellaneous or additional information? There's no restriction on attaching information that's not required by the MOU, or sorry, required by the NOFO. Those are all the questions I'm currently seeing. Again, Rebecca, if you do have a question, I'm happy to answer. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to post those in the Q&A, or you can raise your hand and come online. We have about 7 minutes left, so we're kind of wrapping up, or we'll be wrapping up soon. So please get those in.
Hey, Jason, I just wanted to give a caveat regarding the question about the county commission. There are certain governments in which the head of the county commission is the CEO and can sign the certification of eligibility letter. And so, um, for whoever asked that question, I think that is going to depend on how your local unit of local of government is set up, as if you have a consolidated city county and or how that is structured, and that so that is going to be research that you all have to do. We understand, as Jason described, the varied uh, titles that the head of government can have. And so that is something that you all will have to justify. And so, without knowing more about your community, that is something that you'll need to assess of whether the county commission has that authority or the mayor or a different council person.
Um, are there videos of the other Zoom sessions available? We did not record any of the other Zoom sessions, so this is the only one we're recording for posting. So those questions are not available. Deanna, feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi, Jason. Just going back to the MOU question, I just want to make sure I understand. So the lead victim service provider needs to sign, but you guys are saying that we can include like our procurement contracts, or subawards on the MOU, but they necessarily don't have to sign, right?
Um, yeah, so the NOFO only requires the lead applicant and the required partner to be on and to sign the MOU. And you can include additional partners, you can include additional signatories as you feel that's appropriate. But the NOFA only requires the lead applicant and the required partner.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Um,
Sure, absolutely.
Can I provide a caveat to that? I just want to make it very clear to everyone that when Jason is saying that NOPA only requires that for eligibility to make it through the review process, your application, if you will be reviewed based on you, the assessment of your partnerships, which are evidenced by the MOU compared to what you are proposing to do in the NOFO. And so Jason is 100% right. Eligibility requires a lead and the required partner as detailed in the NOFO, but it will be assessed based on your evidencing of the partnerships detailed in the proposal narrative.
Okay, so thank you, Deanna. Um, we have a question in the Q&A. Purpose area number 3. Would our Blueprint for Safety Committee work that includes work with criminal justice partners, and this is from a victim service provider. So would our Blueprint for Safety Committee work to improve the criminal justice response and our Homicide Reduction Committee fit for this purpose area? Let me grab the purpose area. Purpose area number 3. Purpose area number 3 is to centralize and coordinate police enforcement, prosecution, or judicial responsibility for domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking cases in teams or units of police officers, prosecutors, parole, probation officers, or judges. Rebecca, I can answer this. I think a lot of folks probably on the call don't have a lot of background about the Blueprint for Safety project. But the answer to your question is likely yes. So first of all, victim service providers are eligible to apply to purpose area or purpose number 3, as with any of the 26 purpose areas or purposes. And so yes, as a victim service provider, you can address purpose 3. With your criminal justice system partners. Rebecca, we should probably need more detail to answer your question beyond that. You're certainly eligible to address Purpose Area 3, but we should talk more in detail about specifically about the Blueprint for Safety project and how that works to address Purpose Area 3. But most likely, I believe the answer is probably yes.
No, you're correct,
Okay.
Jason.
Yeah,
You're correct.
and
If you look in past NOFOs, those two were paired together. You are absolutely correct.
perfect. Tiana, did you have another question? Nope.
Oh, I'm
Okay.
so sorry. No, I just forgot to lower my hand. Thank you.
No problem. Rebecca, you're asking about Purpose Area 8. I think Aisha responded with 18.
Oh
Um,
no, I was corrected. I'm sorry.
you,
There's an
oh,
so
8.
you
You
are
did correct it.
correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Um,
No, I didn't correct it in there. I think LaShonda corrected me. It is not 18.
so Purpose Area 8 is to develop or strengthen policies and training for police, prosecutors, and the judiciary in recognizing, investigating, and prosecuting domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking crimes affecting older adult victims, deaf victims, and victims with disabilities. Um, is there something specific about that, Rebecca, that you're wanting? And Rebecca, I'm happy to follow up with you too regarding people with disabilities. So yes, so ICJR funds can provide services to people with disabilities, again, related to domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. Uh, um, and so your Blueprint for Safety project can absolutely provide services to people with disabilities, work to improve the criminal justice response to people with disabilities, which may include the law enforcement response or the prosecution response. Again, so long as it's related to domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. Okay, everyone, that we're going to wrap up here. If you do have any additional questions, we can hang out for a second and answer those. Of course, you can also email us. That's icjr@usdoj.gov, and we can answer your questions via email. But thank you for joining, everybody. We appreciate your time and look forward to reviewing your applications.